since you put it on the budget versus the petition?
I think that, the board has changed since 2018, so we're gonna revisit, how we work them again. But I think, as I mentioned in the beginning, I think the goal is to have an ongoing, more collaborative relationship about the needs, the communication needs.
Mm-hmm.
So that when we're providing a direct service, we're really working with you. However, that said, we still do want to remain an independent third party that's providing coverage of town governance for the citizens.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a really important point that I want to make, because I think that's key to what we do and key to serving the communities, is that so it is a little tricky, because the board can say, well, we don't want to do this anymore, right? And then we'd be in another kind of pickle and probably petition again to get that done.
Right. And right now, how do we determine which meetings are covered and which are not?
What do you mean?
Well, when GNAT's covering, I'm looking at this must be the data from,
Oh, I think that's just based on their capacity to cover meetings. I think that, part of the discussion could, necessarily be that, if you wanted a larger breadth of coverage, you could have that conversation with them about, is there a dollar amount that could be increased to, cover additional meetings if you have planning boards and stuff like that. If that's helpful. I think it's probably mostly finding humans to do the work.
right, yeah, I was
Is the
just
more
curious,
difficult
because
part,
it
but it
used
does.
to be much more than it is now.
Yeah.
I think that was related to the school board,
Mm-hmm.
was before the merger.
Yeah, there were
So if you look
individuals.
back when we first were starting, where we were spending upwards of $5,000 a year on Dorset, it was the school board. So so the T&G meetings are covered, and then so that cost of covering the school
Yep.
piece of it is divided by the towns. So I think that's where the cost savings were.
What is your total budget for the year?
About 540,000. That's for the three channels, and the government services, the education services, and the public services.
I have no objection to this.
No, me neither. If it's petitioned, it's gonna pass anyway, because GNAT, I think they do provide a really good service, and it's really good for the community and
Yep.
for all the residents who can't be here in person. Okay, so,
Do you need a motion to
Sure.
include it as a line item?
Yep.
So moved.
I'll second.
okay, all in favor say aye?
Aye.
Okay,
Thank you guys so much, and I look
Thank you.
forward to having a discussion once we get on the other side of town meeting about the next steps.
okay, perfect.
Thank you.
Thanks
for your
service.
Thank
Have a
you.
great night.
Take care.
Okay, liquor license.
So Sandy's provided us with, these are all renewals, and it's the horse show for third class outdoor,
Oh, yeah.
OCP's
Outdoor
outdoor.
We love cake.
Third class, first class outdoor consumption, and then Asian Williams for second class.
Okay. So when we are approving these, do we need to, are we still the liquor authority? Do we need to get out of meeting and become the liquor authority?
You could vote to enter, let's see.
Liquor Control Board.
Yeah, vote to suspend the select board meeting and enter the liquor control board.
So moved.
Okay.
Second, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Okay, so do we need to approve these one at a time, Sandy, or we just do it all together? Okay. So we're going to.
You'll see that H.N. Williams is there as a second class and a tobacco. Tobacco doesn't need to be approved, it's a piggyback onto their, but it's just letting you know that that liquor license is being renewed.
Okay.
As far as hits, that's the summer horse show,
Oh,
summer
I see.
festival.
Okay.
And they do a outside consumption permit, as well as the first class and the third class.
Did you guys want to take a look at this or want to see?
Does Williams
Pretty
sell
basic.
cigarettes?
Yes, apparently.
Huh, isn't that funny?
wonder
I don't
where
even
they-
think I've ever seen them.
That's why I'm trying to picture where they are. I don't,
Maybe they have them
Hidden.
like behind the counter or
right, you have to
something.
know, secret knock.
Be in the know.
Well, I move that we approve, let's go with the second class license for H.N. Williams. We have to do these one at a time.
And you can do it as presented.
Okay,
I've got them bulleted.
then
so
I
it's
move
fine.
we approve all the liquor licenses for the Horse Show and H.N. Williams store as presented.
I'll second.
Okay, all in favor say aye.
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 Aye. Okay. And now we will have a motion to leave the liquor control
So moved.
board and go back to our regularly scheduled programming
I
as
will
the
second.
select board. All in favor say aye.
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 And we're back.
And presto. Okay. All right, the housing task force update.
I believe Liz is gonna
Go
present.
ahead, Liz.
Yep, so I will kick it off by sharing that we had our second meeting on December the 10th, and it was great. We had presentations from 3 area housing groups, the Bennington County Regional Commission, Jonathan Cooper, and a gentleman named Scott Grimm Lyon attended, and they represented the housing study that you may recall the town had commissioned last year that we'd asked them to do some changes to, and came in with some very interesting kind of macro and micro data points for us to consider. So that was kind of the overall regional approach to thinking about the topic. Then we had Cindy Gubb and Patty Eisenhower from the Mountain Towns Housing Group, which is a volunteer-led group that modeled itself after Habitat for Humanity and are finishing up the first property that they have single-handedly. They were given a gift of some land, and they were able to do a combination of raising private funds and getting a lot of great in-kind services to be able to build a house for a family. I don't quite remember exactly the square footage of the house, and they are in the final stages of having that happen. And so that was really interesting to hear kind of from their point of view, how it had taken place, what they had, who they had worked with. They had ended up working in partnership with the Wyndham Windsor Housing Trust, which is over in Brattleboro, to help them figure out some of the logistics and get advantage of being able to do some of the public, take advantage of some of the public grants that are out there. And then a young woman named Kat Byers, who some of you might remember because she worked for the BCRC for a number of years. She is now the executive director of the powerhouse of public housing in Bennington County, a company called Shires Housing. And she has been in that position for a little over a year now. So she came and gave a great overview of her company and how they've worked with different towns in the region over the last, it wasn't an endless story, but probably the last, 5 or 6 years. And she was very helpful and very interesting, and and so it was a rich, an hour plus of material that was presented to us, and I think that everyone got pretty excited from being able to understand more about this topic. And so one of the things that we decided as a group at the meeting was that we would like Shires Housing to come back. She had offered to come back to the next meeting, which is in January, and do a little bit more of a deep dive into how they go about building projects with towns, all the things that they can do, kind of, how they work and what they really have to offer. And so she will be coming back to the January 10th, 2024 meeting that is going to be happening in, I think, about 3 weeks. Yeah, and then I think we finished the meeting by, realizing that we had initially asked this group to participate in 3 meetings. And I think that the group is starting to gel. It's been this kind of overview, and it's been a lot of absorption of a lot of different elements of this hugely important topic. But we have drilled down to 4 general steps that we think might warrant a phase 2 of this group, which would be a little bit more research driven, and doing some research in small working groups and then reporting out to the group. And those 4 areas are regulatory changes that might be necessary to work with a certain acreage or piece of land to be able to put some different kinds of housing on it. Infrastructure update was another section. Operational models. We've been starting to look at community housing trusts and the various different ways that towns and regions go about being able to get community buy-in to be able to pull off these projects like this. And then the kind of most all-encompassing one, which would be to look at Raptor Lane and to move towards creating some sort of request for proposal and or some sort of not master plan with a capital M and a capital P, but kind of
fits between the 2 plans as close as we possibly can. But in reality, we actually, because of some of that switching around, we actually saved a little bit on that. So if everybody was on, retained on the town policy, it would be something more like a 14% increase. And because of some of that moving around, it's like a 6%. One of the bigger ones here is unemployment insurance. There's some reporting requirements under law that start in July, and we don't really have much of a history or a track record with having issues with unemployment. We're self-insured. We have a sinking fund that sits there. It hasn't been utilized in over a decade. And so what we're proposing in this budget is to purchase insurance through the League of Cities and Towns through their municipal pool, which costs it's actually less than $1,000 a year. And then we'll take the sinking fund balance and then just transfer it right into as a revenue right into the general fund for this year to just offset expenses. And the money in that fund, it's about $50,000. What else? Another kind of thing to point out is that ARPA, the way that we've essentially we've taken the money as revenue loss so we can use it for anything. But in the 2024 year, we will get into a time frame where we have to obligate funds. And from that vantage point, so far the only thing that's really been obligated by the board is the around $125,000 for the solar array at the new town office. And something to point out about that is that there's under the new Inflation Reduction Act, that there's supposed to be a direct pay option for a 30% credit on renewable energy production units. So like in theory, the town's gonna be able to get 30% of that 125 back as a direct payment from the IRS. Is my understanding. So that kind of lowers down the overhead. So depending on how you want to say you obligated the ARPA, you could say that you have more ARPA money, or there would be a percentage that comes back that could be used for something else. And then other options for possibly obligating with ARPA is I've got a number here that's kind of spitballing a little bit. I have talked to some vendors, but to try to raise this building and build essentially a nice kind of East Dorset green with some kind of small structure, but not not enclosed or anything like that, and and probably improvements to the back of the property with the playground. Other options, the Route 30 path, which we're kind of getting toward the end of the scoping study there. You know, housing, stuff like EV chargers at Raptor Lane. And the kind of the list can go on. It's up to the board and the town what they want to do. And I've got kind of what I think is a helpful. You can go from kind of department to department and see the various increases or decreases from year to year, and it kind of gives you a sense of what's can be flagged as different or new. The big ones are obviously the town office piece, wage changes, insurance, excuse me, and then some voter approved appropriation increases that are anticipated. Right now, it's like I said, about an 8.1% increase from year to year. We do expect a grand list increase next year to somewhere in the 3 to 6% range. It's once we reappraise, it's going to go up a lot more than that. So these tax rates will go down. But the projected tax rate 0.3740, last year it was 3.515, and that includes the both fire and town. And baked into our budget is a 3% increase assumed for both fire districts. And then somewhere in here I thought I can answer questions, and then if there's thoughts about the general trajectory and wanting to tweak it, we can definitely do that and see what the board wants to do.
I know we were talking about maybe not doing
Yep.
the Kirby Hollow.
Yeah, so
Is it still reflected in here or not? I didn't
No,
see the
so
paving
it's
schedule.
not. It's included in here.
Mhm.
So if you were to not pave, you would then reduce the numbers that you see down.
Mhm.
I think I thought I put it in here, but maybe I did not.
Yeah, I'd like us to consider
You get too many memos.
not paving Kirby Hollow extension and the Kirby Hollow over to Peace Street,
Not
Yep.
paving.
not paving that. My,
Definitely not the extension, but
my logic is with the extension is,
it doesn't make
it's
sense.
not really servicing a whole lot of people. And the original idea of Paul's Way was that it'd be a great new access for Long Trail School, and so that people would not go across Dorset Hollow Road and Kirby Hollow Road,
Okay.
or even Peace Street, that they would.
Yeah.
And I think we're just inviting people
Yep.
to do that more if we
If
pave
pave
that.
it.
Whereas if we're paving all the way up to the Long Trail School, then that just makes it even more desirable,
That's the
hopefully,
attractive entrance.
yeah,
Yeah,
to come up Paul's Way.
right.
Yeah.
That makes a lot of sense.
So
Yeah.
to speak to that, Megan, if you pull that from the schedule, you could reduce the sinking fund line item for the year. You could
Mhm.
reduce that probably from $25,000 to $30,000 down if you want to pull that,
Mhm.
and you'd still be on schedule with
Right.
kind of everything that you've got broadcast out.
Yeah.
And that would get you probably from 8% to like the 6-7-ish range, somewhere in there.
Yeah, I mean, I just think that makes sense. I don't see
Yeah.
that there's any desperate need to do that, and
Okay.
particularly with all the other things that are going on.
Yep.
And I also think we just, we don't really have a great interest in just trying to pave all our roads,
Right.
because it's just so expensive. But I think it makes sense to do the Long Trail portion. Liz, do you agree with that?
Do. We absolutely do.
We have consensus.
Okay.
So let's do
easy.
that.
I'll take it out and make the edit.
I have a question. The
Mhm.
funds from last year and the year before that were, for 24 and 23, that were for the bond payment, it was 75, no, 125 and 75.
Yeah.
So where did that money go?
So the 2 years ago, that came back as a partial surplus. Last year, we actually needed that as operational. So that basically just buoyed operations. Some of that was, we've got, I think, $40,000 or $50,000 in expense where we'll get some of that back from FEMA. But essentially, it just buoyed the budget.
Okay,
So it wasn't, we didn't.
so it's not available to reapply.
We spent against some of it for, some of the McClay bills and stuff like that won't necessarily be factored into the larger bond cost when we go to kind of close that out.
Okay.
And that'll save on the bond a little bit there, but yeah.
Okay.
Mhm.
I know that we've been talking about these ARPA funds for a long time, and, I'm assuming like one of the hardest things is when they say they have to be spent, you probably have to have receipts, so it's like,
Yeah, they gotta be obligated by December 31st, 24, and then spent by December 31st, 26. So in some communities have spent all of it rather, some have spent very little.
if
Kind
we,
of runs the gamut.
yeah, if we were to think about with a construction schedule for the new town office,
Yep.
when do we think that's going to be completed? Cause we can't get rid of
Good
this
question.
building
Until that, right.
until.
And then it's gonna take a while
we
to
move
tear this
over there.
down.
Yeah, and I'm told that we should start somewhere in spring, early summer 24.
Start construction.
Yeah, with the construction. So there would be costs. This budget will start in July, but the ARPA stuff kind of spans. It's just, it's there and it's available now, so you could, you could use ARPA funds to buy down the cost of the town office construction, which is just gonna save on the bond.
But just think timeline, if we wanted to use that money for green
The
here,
green here.
we'd have to be moved in here, this torn down, thinking about
Yeah, in
getting all
theory,
that
I
done
mean,
before
Or
the
can
end
you
of
tr-
26.
theory,
trade off
yeah.
one for the other?
In
Get
theory,
like
you'd
those
have-
receipts.
You'd have to be done, it has to be obligated and then in theory done construction by the end of 26. So if that's what you're gonna use it for. And it could be portions of it. And I would like to think that by the end of 26 that this would,
We would,
we would have that transition.
Because is it the kind of thing that,
My general understanding is that we should be, we had hoped to be in a, fall, winter of 24, but it's,
right,
probably realistic that it'll be spring of 25,
Right.
where we're transitioning and this place is now empty, and then, then you can go full force into, raising the building, redoing the back, getting rid of the pavement, turning that to grass, adding a pavilion, that stuff. So somewhere in, summer, fall,
26.
spring of 25, summer, fall of 25, spring of 26 would be the way it looks now. You'd have time to just, use
Because
it
we
for
need
that.
to be over there by the
right.
fall of 25.
Right.
And there's other options too, because if you were to use a bunch of it to just offset the bond cost, and then you had bond capacity left, we've borrowed the money and
Right.
it's 4%. So if we ever get to where, if there's capacity in the bond, you could vote to just hey,
Allocate.
we've got X amount of capacity. We could say we've got $1 million worth of capacity. We want to, have a town vote to say we've got $1 million worth of capacity. We've got this particular project. We'd like to use it
Right.
for that. And you're already going to be making the payments and all that anyway. So if you need, if you got to where you had a project where, you didn't want to borrow money, you could basically borrow from yourselves at 4%.
yeah, that's what I was
So.
thinking. Because one of the things that I was thinking is that, at what point do we make this decision? And these ideas have been floating around.
Mm-hmm.
I'm very much in favor of this, turning this space into a space for East Dorset residents and into a town green, and it's still not gonna use up all our ARPA funds. So I would love us to just kind of come to a decision if we can at least allocate that, have a plan to allocate that amount of ARPA funds. We've gotten feedback from surveys and whatnot, but I think that is a very popular idea. And just as we're saying, okay, we've obligated that amount for solar, I'd like to have this as the top of the list. I mean, how does everyone else feel about that?
Do Do we have a number for the path, the bike path, from,
Very
It's
big,
large.
very.
No, it depends on how you do it, if you phase it, you know, it's gonna, in my mind, it's, the total construction, what they've come up with, and this is a grant-funded project that is kind of somewhat a creature of its funding, so it tends to be more expensive because there's a lot of, you know, there's, some of it's, the Agency of Transportation requires a lot of stuff that, you know, you have to deal with, and then there's soft costs related to cultural, environmental stuff that's kind of above and beyond what you normally have to do. Long story short, Henry, the answer is, it's like, the estimate's somewhere between 7.5 and 8.5 million for all of it. And that's 4 miles, almost 4 miles of trail.
wow.
Yeah.
In other words, that,
So ARPA is like.
yeah, drop, it's
Yeah.
literally a drop in the bucket, and that's why I thought
But you
maybe
may
things that we
find
will-
that there
we
may
can
be
actually do.
a small phase of it, or there may be something that you could do, you know, it all depends on the trajectory of that. The way the scoping study works is that you're going into the state's, program, which has grant funding for those projects. You know, the basic problem is that, you know, they only have $3 million to give out for construction every year total for the whole state. And the largest grant they've ever given out is $1 million, I think, to Burlington. So that, you know, there's a little bit of, you know, the funding resources aren't really in line with kind of what it's starting to cost to do some of these things these days. You know, there's some reality there. So I think you'll end up talking about, you know, do we phase it? What phases would maybe make sense? How would that look like?
Well, like Dorset to Williams Store.
Yeah, and then you know, there's two options. You can try to phase it and go, you know, after the grant money, or you could hire an engineering firm and design it yourself. You know, that phase section, and then go out and get an actual real live bid, which could be significantly different than what the state process ends up doing, because you've got with the grant funding, there's disadvantaged business stuff, there's prevailing wage stuff, there's a lot of stuff that ends up, you know, potentially making it, as much as the construction and design, as much as like 30% more expensive than, you know, than what it might be just on the open market with your own money.
Right.
Yeah.
So
What was the total budget for the town office, just for comparison purposes?
3.5.
yeah,
Yeah.
That's very helpful
and that's
comparison.
hard and soft. That's everything. The construction is like two.
Yeah.
For a
that's
sidewalk.
That's like
Not
even a
3/4 of a
sidewalk.
million just of soft costs.
Yeah.
Wow.
So it's 2.8
Yeah.
Man,
for construction.
Maybe you could just go out with some spray paint and spray part of the side of the road.
I think
put some cones up, I think.
well, you're gonna have a presentation of the study, which is really good, sometime probably in January, February. So we can ask lots of questions of the consultant then, in terms of the phasing and what maybe makes sense, what maybe doesn't. And I think, not to belittle the cost estimates, but a large part of what they are talking about designing is a pretty significant, you know, you've got the road shoulder, you've got in the places where it was deemed like doable, basically from like Williams Store to Raptor Lane, you would have the road, you would have, I think, a 6 or 8 foot grass strip, and then a 10-foot wide
Oh, wow.
asphalt path. Yeah, so it's a pretty it's significant. It's not a small piece of infrastructure.
Yeah.
And whether or not you can come up with a per foot, you know, price and try to whittle it down, but you know.
Can you use the ARPA funds for part of your construction, for like interior furniture and supplies and soft costs?
You can use it for anything.
Yeah.
Yeah. General government
Like the new
expense.
shelving for, you know, the vault expansion and all that kind of stuff that's.
Yeah, in theory, we can just, if you wanted to just allot a certain amount, you could just allot it and have it pay for X amount of expense related to the project, and it would just be that.
Cause otherwise that would end up as just a line item in the budget somewhere. And like
Yeah, I
moving
mean, it would be,
costs, I assume that's gotta be pretty.
it'd be part of the bond, you know, part of the bond, yeah. What'll happen with that too is we'll have a short-term note, we'll borrow money to pay the bills, and then the bond will pay us back, and that's kind of external of our regular budget. So,
Now, sitting here thinking, I'm glad you brought that up, cause it really is a drop in the bucket. Like,
Yep.
Um,
yeah.
I do think that it's important to put some of that money to this property, because
Correct.
if we don't, I don't know what else you could do with it. I don't think you could sell it to someone to build a house.
Back portion of the property
Is deeded,
yeah, has a
right,
deed
it's just
restriction,
right.
that it's supposed to be used for public use only.
Huh.
So I'm not sure how that would dovetail with, you know, the front part being privately owned, I don't know how that
Right.
would really work. I think you know, the feedback that we received was kind of far and away that some green space would be
Yeah.
the,
I mean, we do,
by far the, you know, the best option.
once or twice a year, we'll have a
Yep.
East Dorset block party.
I think
And
another thing
I
about
love them, it'd be great to have it right here.
yeah, the lots, it's almost an acre, and it's like 9/10 of an acre altogether. And with the building and the parking lot gone, it's gonna probably feel really, you know, pretty large in terms of
It'd be nice to have a good size
being green
pavilion
space.
or
Yeah,
gazebo where you could have concerts or,
right.
you know.
Yeah, some of the things that we've
like
been
that.
trying to kick around is like a, you know, pour a pad for some kind of a pavilion, could you, you know, have some kind of lighting, could you potentially do a surface where you could, form and maybe, pour and freeze, and it could be a covered skating rink, stuff, you know, stuff like that.
Just think of all the blow-ups you could have at Christmas.
And it gets into, you know, there's water in a septic system here, would you wanna retain
Right.
the septic system, would you wanna retain, if you had a pavilion, would you wanna retain water and potentially a bathroom, or, you know, that's kind of the devil's in the details. So like I said, just trying to come up with a starting figure, you know, 175 is what I kind of put on it. And it could be less, it could be higher, it all depends on kind of what we think. Generally, the pavilions themselves are, you know, I think one that's kind of the right size for this space is probably in the realm of, you know, $40,000 to $50,000 probably, and you know, constructed. And then the rest of it would be, you know, raise the building. We would, you know, obviously use town forces for what we can use them for, but, you know, remediate the parking lot, seed, mulch, all that stuff. Probably add some components to the, I think there was $10,000 or $15,000 in there to add components to the playground. So, I think it's not a perfect number, but it's a pretty good number. You know, if you wanted to talk about allocating it, I mean, I could go back and tune it up if you want.
Yeah.
You know, and get a
Very
real,
helpful.
like a line item, here's the number and here's what it's gonna, you know,
Would you
cover.
have some parking as well?
I don't know, that's the $1 million question. I would think you could make a case for maybe
Parking
some like 3 or 4 spots on the street, maybe. But I don't know, I mean, I think it's, you know, primarily the users are gonna be able to walk
Right.
from home, you know, but it probably does make sense, you know, that, it wouldn't be surprising if there, you know, if you didn't have parking, that there would be a car, you know, from time to time parked on the side of the road, which I don't know if that's, you know, the worst thing either,
Yeah.
so.
I mean, it's like, look what happens with Wilson House, they,
Right.
you know,
Park everywhere.
just park everywhere. And I think that, I'd love to see most of the space used for green space rather than parking or anything else, because I don't know that.
I think an acre, there's quite a lot that could be done with an acre.
Even if you only went as far as
Could
like
be really
right
nice.
here and you had diagonal parking on both sides, you could have fit almost 4 cars on each side going in, you know, you pull in and park slanted or whatever you wanna call it.
Yep. Yeah, we have funding in the budget to try to hire somebody to do
Instead of
A draw-
having
a
a
design.
parking lot and then a playground and a pavilion in between, you know, the kids would be running and
Right.
it'd be
On the
better.
other hand, you also wanna preserve the look of the
Yeah.
green
From the-
stuff
from
from
the
the village,
street.
rather than
Yeah.
just seeing a parking lot, so,
You'd have the parking lot all the way in the back and everything towards the front.
You'd have to retain the access, which is
Yeah.
gonna take up a lot of the space. Yeah, it's complicated.
Yeah.
yeah. But it is, the good thing is just like with town office, when people come here
Part-
for a meeting, they're not,
Yeah, I
most of them are
mean,
not driving in their cars, they're.
some of the, one school of thought would be that no parking and you just force them to walk. Cause
Yeah.
that's kind of the purpose of it, is that,
Yeah.
you know, there is parking down the street, they could park on the side of the road if they really needed to.
Mhm.
But it kind of incentivizes
People do
the-
for a packed planning commission meeting, or
Mhm.
Yeah,
up and down.
yeah. It's a low volume road, so it's not
Right.
like it's,
Somebody asked me the other day, I told them it was gonna be a homeless shelter.
Section 8 housing.
no,
Nice.
when we did our survey.
Nice, Sandy. They'll be
residential-
coming to the next meeting.
Residential uses were not, seen.
Wasn't, no, they didn't,
Yeah, they didn't want, I think we said, you know, break it up into like 3 apartments,
Hmm.
you know, you know. I think the question was the town divesting and somebody else would actually own it and it would be residential. And that was frowned upon, so. Okay, I can come back with a better list
Yep.
and some costs.
And
Is
I would
the,
think-
Is there another,
Is the next step with our budget, to warn a public hearing for next meeting?
yeah, unless you wanna meet again in the interim to talk about it or change stuff.
Well, I think having taken out the Kirby Hollow paving, if that's gonna lower that number.
Yeah, I mean, if
I don't
you get into that 6 and 7% range, then you're from year to year, you know, aside from the bond changes, you're at like a 2 to 3% budget increase,
Mhm.
And-
which is in line with kind of
Yep.
what you normally
Right.
are.
And you thought, pulling Kent Hill out would be somewhat insignificant as far as the impact?
Yeah, yeah.
And that hasn't been done in 20 years.
It needs to be done in some way, shape, or form.
Paving of Kent Hill.
Kent Hill, yeah. Was
Because
last
that's
done in
also on the
2004.
Right.
It was 4 or 06, yeah, it's been a long time. And it's got there's a lot of water, service work impacts on the road, so it's starting to get, you know, kind of chopped up, which is what happens.
So that's all done. It's ready to be.
It's not all done yet, no, but in theory, in this next budget cycle, you know, somewhere around when we normally pave, like late summer,
It will be done.
it should be done, and large portions of it we should be able to pave,
Yeah.
so.
Yeah, I mean, let's go to public hearing.
Yeah.
I
Because
agree.
the idea would be if we found something in the meantime, we could just talk about it next.
And
we
Jim
can
obviously
change if we
had
want.
Yeah, you
written
can
a few
still-
questions, so,
Yep.
in that email,
I did
Um,
respond to Jim's questions.
Okay, I guess
a
I-
little, it was not long ago, so
okay,
you're probably driving.
okay.
So trying to think if
I was just gonna say, if you.
like, we could bring them up if you
Yeah,
want.
I think it would be a good idea just to bring them up.
Okay, so Jim had Jim Salzgiver, who can't make it, had pointed out a list of questions. One was related to the nuance that we're potentially gonna have a double, you know, we're gonna have 2 facilities going kind of at the same time for a portion of this budget, and if you look at the town office department line items, they're increased pretty significantly for stuff like heat and electricity, and just contemplating having 2 buildings potentially online for a portion of the budget. So it is in there. Let's see. Another question was about our good town clerk Sandy, just hoping how long she's gonna stay on. And the general answer is for a while, to work in the new building. So,
Oh, cool.
and there's a general election next
I wanna get
year.
it set up.
Yeah, biggest things is the general election next year, and that,
Oh, yeah.
you know, we gotta get through that
That'll be
before we
good.
can
I said I
start.
would never do another presidential, but
But
here
yeah.
we go.
Mhm.
4 years goes by fast.
Oh, yeah,
Um,
you can't leave until the new office is set up, sorry.
We had another question about, if you look at like animal control, the line items, we rarely spend money out of those. One reason is the ACO line item, that I actually do most of that work. I've tried a few times to hire somebody. There ends up being like one to, maybe one call, maybe as many as 2 or 3 calls a month. 99.9% of the time, before you even can get in your car and get to the location where the dog is, the owner has either come to get it.
Mm-hmm.
The person that's found it has posted it on Facebook and they figured it out.
Yeah.
So it's like, it's really, I've even tried to contemplate paying somebody a stipend, like a monthly stipend and some of the other stuff, and we've just never really had any takers, and I haven't advertised for it very hard lately, but it is potentially a need. Stuff does come up from time to time. The other piece is that with animal control, we do occasionally have expense from year to year, even though we may go a couple years without it.
For boarding or-
Sometimes the dogs have to go to like Aeolus, and they'll keep them overnight for us, like if we can't find the owner. And that's really kind of the reason. I don't think there's large budgetary numbers in there, but they're kind of placeholders just in case something were to happen, because it does happen from time to time.
Yeah.
And he had a question about the HRA stuff, which I kind of already talked about. And then kind of maybe segueing a little bit into the town meeting articles. He had a question about the Meadowy Park.
Yeah. What
Yeah,
is
I had a
that?
question about that
I
too.
didn't know what that was.
So
I don't know what it is.
Call it?
many years ago, the Vermont Land Trust conserved Leech, right? Isn't it Leech? It's kind of Leech.
Mhm.
The Leech,
Yep.
the Leech Farm, and then which is the other one, Liz? Do you know?
Graff.
There's Craft.
It's leach and then it's,
It used to be Graff.
Yeah, so there's 2 farms that were conserved, and as part of that process, there was a kind of an overlapping little area that at the time they turned into green space, and there was a softball field there.
Yeah.
There's a pavilion there,
Dog
Mhm.
park.
some playground equipment, and there was a board that had members from Dorset, Rupert, Pollitt, a little nonprofit that ran it and it mowed it, and Dorset used to give it money from year to year, and we haven't done that in a really long time, probably like 10 years or more. And the board the entity is now defunct, but there's still an easement for the operation of a park. People still go there. The landowners actually have to now retain insurance, and it's kind of so the landowners are asking the towns to either take it over and just operate it like it's kind of been operated, and the towns can kind of figure out what they want to do with it. Or if the towns don't want to do it, then they can just kind of unwind the entity, and then it would just go back to being part of the 2 farms.
Is this up off Route 30?
Yep,
Yeah.
Right.
it's off Route.
Okay.
off Route
Yeah, that's
30.
right.
Just
That's
just
right
past.
next to
Herrick Road.
Yeah, it's
Just past Herrick.
I was gonna say it's like a couple minutes beyond Old Gray Barn on the right.
Right.
Yep.
Right.
And so it seems like there's gonna be initially there was some talk about warning this article. I don't know that it's actually gonna happen. It's kind of dependent upon Rupert, the facilities in Rupert. It kind of is most logical for them to be, the lead town in the whole discussion. Dorset's kind of taking the approach that we're happy to, partner, because certainly there's Dorset residents that go there. In fact, when we did the site meeting, I think we saw no less than like 3 or 4 Dorset residents that showed up to walk their dogs. So,
It's a great little dog park.
that's kind of the function now as a dog park. I think what there's been talk of amongst the towns is if we're going to do this, should we get some public input? Should we change stuff? Should we do something differently? I think generally there's not a lot of appetite in the other towns to do much different. Both Rupert and Pollitt are pretty frugal, so I think that the way I envision it kind of carrying out is, you know, continuing kind of what exists, which is it's green space, it's open space, people can have picnics there. You know, there is a pretty nice pavilion where you could have a kid's birthday party really easily. You know, and the town would then go back to kind of where it was a decade ago, probably, you know, helping monetarily in the small thousands, high hundreds maybe, to just offset costs like mowing and insurance and stuff like that. So, but in Rupert, it's a much more large discussion item, and they were talking about putting it on the town meeting ballot. And they had asked us to do it too, so. But they may take it off, I don't know. So, and if they do, then we wouldn't warn it if they're not gonna warn it. So,
Yeah, that's
mean,
what I
my
was
feeling
wondering,
is
if it's
Charlie
three
Rockwell's
different
problem.
entities.
We should just step away,
We should what?
step away.
And then we can go take their pavilion and bring it over.
Well, no, it's their
It's-
pavilion, but.
Yeah, we could step away, but we do have residents that utilize it, so that's
It's
the,
a large
Really?
parcel, it's 14 acres.
Wow, 14
Yeah,
acres, yeah, well, it's
it's
kind
a
of
big
softball
parcel.
field.
no, I was at the meeting, Henry, and there's like, 3 of the cars that pulled up were people that live on the West
Who
Road.
weren't there for the meeting, they just happened
No,
to
they
show
were just
up.
there walking their dogs, yeah. Cause we were like at that point in the discussion, like, you know, it's 5 or 10 minutes away from
And
Dorset.
it's been there for a long time.
Yeah,
Yeah.
a really long
Yeah,
time.
Long
Yeah,
time.
there used to be a softball field and there was a men's league that used
And why
it.
did we stop contributing?
Because the group that used to maintain it is gone.
Oh.
They don't have any board members, they don't ask for any money. So they stopped asking for money, so
We
we
just stopped giving.
just stopped giving, and then it just
Oh,
kinda,
there's softball field.
Well, if there's
So
nobody to
they-
manage it, then you can't tell where the money's going.
yeah. So, I mean, I think that there's yeah, we can see what Rupert does and we'll
Okay.
get there when we get
Okay.
there.
Okay, so back to the budget, so Jim's questions we answered, so was there anything else that we wanted to ask about the budget before?
I just have a quick thing. Rob, I'm just wondering, I don't see it. Is Discover Dorset anywhere in here?
Yes. Yep.
Okay, I just didn't,
It's in
what category it was in.
budgeted appropriations.
Oh,
There's,
gotcha.
Dorset Economic Development.
Okay, that's what it is. Gotcha.
well, that was gonna be my question, Liz, cause I wasn't sure what that was for. And
See, Frank?
I'm glad you asked.
That's for the website,
Right. The destination marketing
Yeah.
website and social media presence.
Yep.
Gotcha.
Outreach events, other stuff.
Perfect.
But we're gonna be talking about the warning after we're talking about
Yeah.
the budget, correct?
Yeah, we got
Okay.
ahead of ourselves a little bit.
Um, Rob, just looking at vehicle expense reimbursement,
Uh-huh,
taking a pretty big jump,
yep.
just what's going on there?
Which page is that?
That's what I'm asking for, essentially. Are you talking about,
It's going from 7,200 to 10,000, I think.
yep. Yep. It covers a car, gas. Essentially.
Oh, I see, you're actually, boy, that jumps all over the place. So
Well, it's been
last year you spent 10,000,
yes,
Yeah.
and that's yep.
okay. So we're just catching up, so what we're doing. And it looks like you're on track to spend 10,000 again this year.
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
Can I ask a question, Rob? Did you bring up the $300, I know it's only $300 for
No, I
that.
did not.
I mean, if we're talking about budget, that's a line item we have to add in.
So NeighborWorks, which is a nonprofit located in Rutland, I
Mm.
believe, has a request for an appropriation of $300. And I think the question that Sandy's bringing up is, do you want to make them petition for $300, or do you want to maybe have them come to a meeting and explain the stuff they do, provide information?
I asked
Do we
that
know
question of
anything
them
about
today, and they're the ones that help with, people financing their energy audits for the homes or energy efficiency.
Did-
They also do a lot of the down payments for the subsidized housing for like Culver Lane, people buying those homes, the 4
I
homes.
see.
They help finance that. We've had a couple elderly, people in town get loans from them for various small $25,000 loans, maybe for energy efficiency work. They work through Brock. So they have done work in our community, and I asked her if
Yeah.
she had any idea how much, and she said she could get those figures for us, but the letter is for what she does in Bennington and Rutland County,
Yeah.
of what the organization does, but it's based out of Rutland, but it's called Neighbor Northwest.
NeighborWorks.
Yeah.
NeighborWorks of
Yeah.
Northwest Vermont, or Southwest, or something, like
If- I can't speak for Jim, but if he was here, he would say that the energy committee's had a lot of interaction with NeighborWorks over the
Yeah.
years.
And because
they-
it's such a small amount,
It's such a small amount,
$300,
Yeah, do you wanna make them,
and it sounds like what they're doing is very
yeah.
worthy and helpful.
Right, and I told her that it was perfect timing, cause I got the letter in the mail today, and I called her to say what, cause she said, it acts like the letter sounds like we've given in the past, and I knew we had not, and she
Yeah.
said we hadn't, but other towns had, and they're just looking for a little bit just to help, cause they give to they give back so much to our community. So to
Okay.
me, it was easier just to put it as a
Add
$300
that and make it,
line item.
Yeah.
agreed.
And while we're talking about all the appropriations, cause everybody is keep asking for more and more money, have we ever given it a thought to put it back on the ballot?
they talked about it.
Well, we did talk about it, Sandy, but what we felt was, the floor vote, neither way is perfect. When people come in to vote, they kind of just rubber stamp it,
Well, they don't.
and you
well,
can't even amend it. Like if it's on the
You
floor.
can't admit, right, but I think what's happening, my gut feeling is that people don't wanna stand up and make an amendment because
I know.
there's so few
Small
people
town.
there, and there's only 100 people voting on $400,000 worth of
I
appropriations.
think
I know.
the other part of that discussion too is that nobody could recall anything ever getting voted down on the ballot either. I think
Right.
that's
Mhm.
part of that.
But they're more apt to vote down behind the
Yeah,
curtain than they
even,
are
true.
standing up in
Well-
front of people to say no.
It's an
So
interesting
Jim
dynamic.
Salzgiver and I had a talk with VNA a couple of weeks ago, and we talked them into reducing the 40 grand down to 30 grand, and also their commitment to start hitting the other towns a little harder, so that then in the following year, we can try to reduce it again. So, cause I said, I'm ready for a floor fight.
Yeah,
Yeah,
And,
Great.
and, I said, who knows where that would go, so let's just, and the VNA does really important work.
Right.
No doubt about it, and it's really a very economic way of dealing with the issue.
but if you look at the history of these that are asking for the most amount of money, for instance, the players, they came to us when they needed work done to their furnace or
the roof.
The
roof.
roof, right?
Yeah.
And then the next year it was the parking lot, and then, okay, so now they're just assuming that every year we're gonna give them for the $40,000,
20,000.
or the 20,000, and then, right, and the same with, and now we've got
Library.
the
Library's
library,
20.
was again, they were doing the windows, it was always constructional stuff, and now all of a sudden it's part of their budget, it's part of their funding. The big one that I have a real concern with this year is the Southwestern Vermont Council on Aging, they're going up 300%. Now, they're going from $1,600 to $1,600 to $5,000. Now, I get it, food costs have gone up and stuff, but why a 300% in 1 year? I mean, why not come to us and do 2,500 this year and maybe 3,000 next year and then 3,500? So I just like that, it's like it's never ending, and it just at some point,
I know,
And
and it's all
The
cumulative.
Northshire Day School, they're.
Yeah, the North Shire Day School,
They
they just
stayed the
popped up
same,
out
yeah.
of, but they
Yeah.
just came in 2 years ago
2 years
suddenly
ago.
and with 13,000,
Mhm.
which is a huge chunk of money.
right,
And a single Dorset resident goes.
Pardon?
Remember? That was the kicker with that one. Not a single little kid from Dorset went to the school.
No, they do now.
I think
They've
there are
got-
like 2 or 3 that.
now there's
that go.
13, cause I asked when they brought the petition.
Okay, I
So-
take it back.
Yeah, so this year there's 13 children there, and she said it does fluctuate, and,
Right.
so at least, that's 1,000 a kid, assuming. But It's just, you know, I don't mind giving, but
I know.
at some point, enough's enough, and we nonprofits shouldn't be depending on us as taxpayers, we already give.
Right.
We're already, you know.
So, I mean, to your point, what I'm worried about is that if we put it on the ballot, that's gonna lock it in more than if it's a floor vote. If there are concerns on the floor, then, you know, somebody just needs to have the chutzpah to
Well,
stand up and
I will,
talk about
I
it.
am going to this year, I'm just putting it
Yeah,
out
it
there,
can-
I am
yeah.
definitely gonna ask about the
The
council.
amounts can be changed on the
Yeah.
floor,
Right.
it can
Yeah.
be, you know.
Because I just feel like, we've been discussing this for like the last year, because particularly when the North Shore Day School came in, it said we have no recourse over the amounts they're asking for, and that seems wrong. It seems like with everything else, we work out a budget and figure out what we can and what we can't support. And here, we're not even given the ability to adjust the numbers. All of these are good organizations.
Absolutely.
And there's no reason why Dorset shouldn't be supporting them in some measure, but we have no way of controlling the actual number. All they have to do is make up a number, they could come in and say $75,000. And if people just check the
Right.
box,
Right, and the other one that's coming in that I've had conversations with in the last couple of weeks is the collaborative, they've always gotten $750.
right,
They wanna ask for more, but they haven't started the petition yet, so they asked me today, how many signatures we need, I said, and if they don't get the petition in time, would they still get the $750? And I said, yes, because you're gonna go in at the $750
Yeah.
Oh.
at this point, cause you don't have to petition at $750, but if you change the dollar amount, you have to petition. I said, but you're also taking the chance that somebody might stay up and say, oh, we're not gonna give you $750, we're gonna give you less. So, be careful how you do it, I mean, you're more than welcome to say you need more money, doesn't mean you're gonna get it, but somebody could always make a motion to gonna give you less, so just take for warning that for this year, because you're so late in getting it going, you might wanna just ride out the $750, get your ball in the Parade Park next year and get out there and petition for 1,000 or 1,500, whatever you want. But they're just,
I mean, then, you know,
and we have a new one this year too,
The
The
Maple Hill.
Maple Hill.
yeah.
which again, it's a cemetery, and they've never asked for any money. But one of the thoughts, so we've been going over and over, like, how do we get people to actually, and that was the question with the petition, which, I get it, you know, it got to the point where there were so many petitions floating around that people were just signing them without thinking. But at least it got people out there talking about it, like,
Right.
well, what is your organization, why am I signing this? And I had to say, at least for representing the Historic Society, that, you know, we're asking for the town to give us money to support our mission. After a while, people aren't bothering to ask how much, they're just like, oh, it's a good mission, because they're not focusing. But
Yeah,
again, I feel very frustrated with the amounts that are being popped up, and even coming down to 30, I think is kind of ridiculous, considering their endowment. We're talking about the Nursing Association, and the fact that they ask for so little from other places, like,
I should ask for more. no
I
doubt about it.
appreciate that you're trying to accommodate us, but, you know, like, I'd like to slash that by 75%. But, you know, another thought is to have someone in the audience that just basically says, why don't we, for every single article where they're asking for money, say, why that amount? And who else gives you that? I don't know.
Right, we have, I don't know if reputation's the right word, but historically, we approve everything.
Right,
And maybe we need some people to be rabble rousers and say, oh, okay, well, Dorset's not a sure thing, it's not just an automatic, you've gotta
exactly.
come here and prove what it is you want or asking
Right.
for.
And we used to have some people in the audience who raised those questions, but again, when we
Yeah.
split with the school board,
Mm.
you know, it just sort of became this thing where, you know, we get limited people, and then, you know, just a lot of those people are
We get more
older,
at town
whatever.
meeting though than the school board gets at their,
Is that right?
yeah,
oh, yeah,
it's like
cause I
startling.
did that
I mean,
meeting,
it's
I
a
took the
dynamic
minutes
of
that
like,
meeting.
if it's not super local, you know, for everybody
Right.
anymore, but it's like, you know, you have a 37 million dollar budget and there's maybe 20 people in the room.
I don't even think
Wow.
there's that, or you get a
Wow.
couple of teachers.
First year there was more, but.
Yeah, you get a couple of staff members, and then last year there was maybe 3 new people to the community that
Wow.
came and asked questions, but
if we're,
That's where
And
most of
maybe
your
this is
tax
just
bill goes.
too hard, but if we're asking people, above a certain amount to petition, are we able to at town meeting just sort of make it a requirement that when they get up and talk about their entity, that they actually specifically address the amount that they're asking for and why? I mean, is there some way we can do that at town meeting?
Well, we can ask,
Yeah,
certainly,
just have like,
Right.
but they don't have to answer. But yeah, we can certainly ask.
You could, but sometimes the representatives that speak are actually residents that
I
are
know.
like board members, so
and they're not gonna know.
whether or not they have the knowledge of, the
It's-
finances of the organization, I don't know. It's tricky.
You know, years ago when we had.
This reminds me a little bit of what we were talking about 3 or 4 years ago with this whole process of thinking about maybe it's not on this end, but it's on the reporting end, of trying to figure out a way for us to have a better sense of what the appropriation that we're giving to them, what is the percentage of it to their total budget? How does it impact the actual programs, how are they actually using it? To kind of get a sense of what the impact of the gift is. Because I think that everyone's right. I think pretty much people ask, and with a few exceptions, it's pretty much usually just ushered in.
Sandy, what were you gonna say?
Well, I agree with you, Liz, because when Council on Aging brought in their petition, they had hand marked it, scribbled all over it, and so I rejected it, because you can't write on the face of a petition, it can only say what
Right.
it says. And they had written on it that it was for Meals on Wheels, but that's only a portion of what they do. So
Right.
when they sent in their letter as to what they do, they only serve 6, and I get it, I don't want anybody going hungry, and if you need to have a meal, absolutely have a meal, but they serve 6 citizens in Dorset.
Right.
So they're going from $1,600 to $5,000, and, they said, well, 296 meals, but yeah, well, that's for 6 people. And then they gave nutritional counseling to a few elderly people,
Yeah.
it was just crazy, it was
Yeah.
less than 9 people total, is what they've
Right.
done. And
I mean, the Council on Aging, it's a great organization. Its high need area is Bennington. It does great work, but to your point, 6 people is
a lot of
maybe
money, yeah,
there's a better way to serve those 6 people than
Mhm.
that.
yeah.
I mean, the fact is that it's a proportional thing, right? It's a relative to our size and the people being served, the
And then you
amounts
get
that are being asked for.
And then you have somebody like Pave, who comes to our meeting and says, well, we give them $1,500 or $2,000, but then they tell you, we've serviced, 7 families from your community, we have provided, battered services for, that's eye-opening. I mean,
Right.
then they're putting the
Right.
numbers in front of you,
Mm-hmm.
where if they
Right.
just say, well, you need $40,000 for nursing association, well, how many residents are you serving, how many?
Right.
I think we need more of the,
And what
the needs
percentage of that, of your overall budget are we?
right.
Right, because how many people are they serving in Manchester versus the amount they're asking for from Manchester?
Yep.
But this is the dilemma, and then, so, maybe that's what we do, we approach town meeting a little differently, where we ask the people, just, I don't know, cause I know Kevin's gonna read everything out, so we have to do everything by the book, but.
Right, but,
can-
and maybe it's a little bit too late for this year in our request, but I
Yep.
think going forward next year, we should say to them, in your budget that you present to us, we wanna know the nuts and bolts of what you do for the Dorset community, not what you do.
Exactly.
Not as your, what percentage are we of your budget? If we're like minus 1% of your budget,
And you're not gonna get those answers.
you don't think?
No, they don't, most of these small ones don't even have the capacity to barely send us an invoice to send them the money, right? I mean, it's.
Well, but they're registered nonprofits, Rob, in the state, so they have
are,
to.
but what you're gonna end up doing is me and Nancy are gonna be harassing these people for
Which
information.
she does
But-
every
But they're not
June.
gonna
Or if it was over a certain dollar
Yeah,
amount, then.
that's what, if
That-
we're limiting at this, it's not that many entities that are above $2,000. I
So you
mean,
can do whatever, I'm just telling you what the result's gonna be.
right,
If you-
but I mean, for someplace like the
If you take
Nursing
that approach.
Association
Right.
or, well,
Yeah,
I mean.
those, they have staff, they're large organizations, that's different.
But like, we're not asking for key performance indicators. Anyone, if you apply to the Vermont Community Foundation for one of those Spark grants and you get your $3,000 or $4,000, there is a report that you have to do.
Mhm.
I think we had talked about this a few years ago, I think we could come up with a straightforward way for them to report out on it, so that then if there could be some sort of consolidated impact statement that could be presented as like, this is what we're giving this money to, and it's not totally finely tuned, but it is having impact in our community. That's what the taxpayers want to see, right?
Because we actually have, you can kind of break it down by entity. So first of all, you've got the monetary thing. Once you get to a certain level where they're asking for something, then the monies become much more important. So let's just say every entity above 2,000, but then clearly the ones that are in Dorset, I mean, if you're talking about whether it's the library, the historic society, or cemetery, it's very obvious that those are all Dorset residents. It's the other entities that are asking for large amounts that operate with many different towns.
Right.
Where that information would be more relevant. And in particular for the size of our town and the number of residents served. When I'm looking
Well-
at the VNA or,
I mean, they all provide reports.
Yeah,
That are in
I know.
the town
Right.
report, so some of it's got the information you're talking
There's all
about,
kinds of
some of them
different
are
format.
form letters.
right,
I don't know.
But then again, like we talked about before, like the Playhouse, when that was a specific need-based request, and now it's just.
Blanket request?
Right,
And
part of
is
their
that-
general
Is this
operation.
just your general budget, and
Part
if
of their
so,
budget.
but like even the North Shire Day School, which again, I agree, we don't have daycare facilities here. If you've got people you want to come work,
We have private.
it's a good,
Right.
yeah, it's a good.
It's an essential service.
It's an essential service, but, how are they breaking down the money? Are they asking each town for 13,000? Are they counting the number of students and then saying this much per student per year? Or are they just saying, okay, we're gonna have 13 from Dorset, 13 from Manchester, and regardless of how many students are being helped?
and it's only one facility, Kathy Lawrence could come in here and say, hey,
Exactly.
Well, that's exactly right.
She's private,
Good.
so she couldn't,
so North
Right.
Shire is a public,
they're nonprofit.
they're nonprofit.
The nonprofit.
Okay.
But
Yeah, but the point is proportionality.
I think she-
proportionality.
Yeah, that's my
Tax
biggest
implications
concern,
and
is
stuff,
just
yeah.
proportionality.
And
I
that's what
don't
was
wanna
way
deny
out,
anybody anything,
No,
but
but that was what was way out of whack with VNA. I mean,
Correct.
When you see Manchester, I mean, even Rutland was less.
Yeah, and that was a creature
Really?
of the
Yeah,
number
it was
being high from
35,000.
Dorset Nursing.
right, because
That's
it
why.
changed its
So-
ownership.
For a while, the money was a much larger proportion of what the service that was being performed was, because it was done locally. But,
And
to
then
your
it
point,
never
it's-
got adjusted.
yeah, it's a regional entity now.
I guess it's, how do we get people at town meeting to care about this? Obviously, we've been talking about it, so it's, we're thinking, but you show up to town meeting, you're, sitting on an uncomfortable chair, kinda wanna go home anyway.
So true.
Um,
But also the
But I
select
don't
board
know,
isn't
like-
even really given
right,
a
this-
role,
right,
right?
I don't know if, we could have somebody get up and before all this and just say, hey, think about this a different way.
Yeah, the only thing
Motivational speakers.
I could think of that I've thought of over the years is the very small ones that are small organizations, to potentially have them, either, I don't know if it's once a year might be too much, but to look at including them in the regular budget and just have them give an update at a select board meeting.
Mhm.
Whereas, so then town meeting would be the kind of
The
the
big ones.
biggies, and maybe you would get more,
Right,
cause one of the way that it's
Yeah.
set up now
Yeah.
is more than a dozen of them. There's a lot of fatigue
Mhm.
toward the end of it,
and
That's not-
it is part of the meeting.
it was
the
only
wellness
like
part of the meeting, it's
4 of them, that were larger dollar
Right.
amounts, so
Right.
you're looking at it in
People
the
being-
context of the larger amounts. you know, maybe that,
That's
More-
not a bad
More
idea.
willing to
Like maybe-
engage on that.
If we sort of, like, we're getting there, right? Like now we ask
Yeah,
for
it's
petitions
tricky
just to
though,
get
'cause
the
you're-
conversation out there.
you kind of set the precedent of like there's the little small
Everybody gets on the budget.
nonprofits, if they
Right.
can, you know, they would have to come to you, they would have to come to the board, make the request,
Yeah.
yes, we're gonna include you, you don't have to petition. You also don't have to speak at town meeting because we, you know, we feel that what you're doing is good enough, and you can still have reports in the report, but, and then that kind of segregates the larger ones,
Yeah,
you know, to more of a,
More
you know,
heated discussion.
more floor time, I guess,
Mhm.
sort of, so to
Not,
speak.
not
Or
heated, but
even-
more.
I mean, the
you know,
results might be, very well be the same, but the meeting would be shorter.
Or even could we reorder this in order of what they're asking for? I don't know how these come in if they.
No,
can do-
we assign them any way we want.
You can do whatever you want, yeah.
So just
This
thinking,
is
okay,
just-
if we've got 5 that are all 500, 700, zip through those, or save them for the end, one or the other. And put your big ones together to kind of get somebody's
Highlight them.
attention, right?
Like right now, we could reorder this, right,
Yes.
Sandy?
That's what I'm
You
saying.
can do whatever you want,
You could have anywhere, and even if they've petitioned, you could automatically put them in.
and take the article off, you wouldn't have to, you could just say, we're, you know.
Anything,
like,
like
right
anything
now,
less
we
than
could-
$2,000,
But what
we're gonna put in the
what
budget.
I'm throwing in there is like, make them interact, try to make them come to a meeting,
Yeah.
interact. If they can get a board member here, or a resident and a staff
Or a
member
staff
here,
member here, yeah.
to just come, and they will, you know, it may take a little bit of, you know, back and forth, but they,
And
you know,
you think about
they
it,
would do it.
because some of these people are coming from Bennington or
Right.
Rutland, but like
Might
the
have more
collaborative,
than one
$750, just put it in the budget, I mean,
Exactly.
we're talking peanuts,
Right.
pennies, you know? But I'm talking about these big items that just
Right.
continually just think that we're part of their budget process, is
Right.
that, you know, tell us what you
And-
know with that.
Yeah,
I
they
mean,
just
I
think, oh, well, why not ask
You
for
know,
more
you
money?
came to us because you wanted a, you know, new furnace or a new roof, and now what are you doing with the 40,000 this year?
Well, and I heard someone say to me from one of these entities, well, it's been a long time since we've asked for an increase, and I'm like,
Yeah.
"But you're not an employee, you
Right.
know? Like, this is just assistance that
Well, I
we
think-
give.
Yeah. Liz said, it's a gift. The town.
It's a great,
It's,
Grant, perhaps.
yeah, some of it is, you know, we don't provide those services, or we don't operate
Right.
those entities, so that's, somebody else does. and
Right.
it's helping
Provides a
them defray.
service to the town, I mean, that's
Yeah.
traditionally been the thought behind it, that we
Right.
don't provide that service, so we're going to assist
Sure.
those entities that do, which is great. But some of these are just, they're not proportional, that's really what it is. So if we're going to look at this, so we're not gonna move anything to the budget this year as a line item, because we haven't had an opportunity to speak to speak to anyone to have that conversation.
well, but do we
Other
need
than
to?
Gina.
Why don't we?
It's up to you, I mean, it would just be whether or not you wanted, you know, some input as a part of that process, you know, to.
Right, but if they're so
So-
small, you know, if we draw
You
the
could
line at
move them and then
$2,000.
tell them, hey, we'd like you to come in May and talk to us about what you do.
Yeah,
You could do that too.
I mean, that's.
Yeah.
I would say pull the trigger on that, cause that puts the focus on the remaining 7 or 8.
Mhm.
So are we going to say what we did for petitioning then, anything under 2,000?
Just
You
put
would
in the
put as a
budget.
line item?
And when they bring in their petitions, I could tell them that, you know, this, you don't have, you still have to come to the meeting, but your budget, your dollar amount has been included in the budget
And
this
then,
year. And
Just to
then going
recap, once it
forward-
goes into the budget, the whole budget would have to get voted down in order for that to not, for them
Right.
to not get the,
Right.
so they're insulated from being voted on by themselves, essentially.
And this is just a 1-year,
Yeah, from year to year, you could change it next year if you wanted to, you
Yeah.
can do whatever you want.
Yeah, and maybe it would take a cut, just a couple of years to get people back in
And
the
you
habit
wouldn't
of.
have to have them all come on one meeting, you could invite,
No,
send them,
well, that's
right,
the-
to say, we would like you to come in
Yeah.
August,
Right.
we'd like you to come
Yeah.
in September, you know, and take
Tell us
5-minute
Right,
public
tell us what you do.
brief comment, tell us what you
like
do for
tonight
us.
we had GNAT.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Okay, so what was that, like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8,
And
9? That would
GNAT's
take
gonna-
like 9 things off of here.
And GNAT's gonna be a line item,
Correct, yeah.
GNAT's gonna be a line item.
yeah, so that's,
And then I could put the other ones in numeric order by the dollar amount.
The largest first.
the largest first,
Cause that will catch people's eyes and then
okay,
they'll talk about,
they'll be fresh.
yeah,
Excuse me.
Their butts aren't too sore yet.
can we put it in bold type or highlight it? Yeah, and then, you know, we can talk again at the next meeting as to whether we actually have, people just get up and say like, what, how many residents are you serving versus the amount that you're asking for, and in relation to other towns? How do we stand? Because that's really the question with VNA, it's just like, it's clear
Yeah.
that they're way overcharging us.
Yeah.
So everything under 2,000 in the budget
Yeah,
and not voted.
Yeah.
Okay, okay.
So,
And then,
Approve
and
it
then
any-
structure the articles largest
largest to smallest.
to
Smallest.
smallest.
so
And I'll do
Maple
them in
Hill
alphabetical order
Cemetery,
as
So
well.
40 to 2.
in Maple Hill Cemetery request, I think it said it was for a specific,
It's for a shed, I think.
for
Yeah.
a tool shed or something?
Maintenance shed to store their equipment and
So the
tools.
question there would be like, well, is this gonna be a one-timer then, right?
Right.
You know, next year maybe.
That's the question for them, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the, when they're specifying like that, you know, that once the shed's built, then
Cause that's a mistake we made
in
with
theory.
the playhouse,
then
is
you
that
just
we.
go- Yeah, well, they just
No,
I
I
think,
think we did though, I think I.
no,
did.
they restructured the petition the next year.
Right.
And just said for general maintenance
general.
costs, I think.
But we already provide for the one cemetery, right? And then this year it's the other cemetery.
So,
For-
yeah, so we have had a voted appropriation for the East Dorset Cemetery for a long, long time.
Right.
The old cemeteries, old being one, well, there's one on Dorset Hill that the town actually owns the land. And then there's a handful of others that are like on the edge of the road and some are
Right.
some are on private property, but we pay to maintain, we kind of pay to maintain those ourselves. And then Maple Hill, we don't really have any involvement.
And there are
with
some
at all.
towns throughout the state that are taking over cemeteries.
So it's coming to
Right.
you.
No, and that's what I was going to say, with the cemeteries, I
The-
don't have as much of a
With
problem.
East
They're-
Dorset,
It's clearly Dorset residents they're
yeah,
servicing.
removing the petition is
Well-
the precursor to them saying, you know, we can't do this anymore, we
Yeah.
don't have the capacity. Um,
Yeah.
So we're,
Mhm.
you know, as long
Yeah.
as we can keep it in appropriation, it won't be, you know,
Right.
it won't impact staff time and other you know, costs really, cause once that happens, it'll be
Right,
significantly different.
no, I think we should support the cemeteries for sure, because there's a clear correlation.
Right.
Yeah,
Plus it's Malcolm Cooper asking.
It was actually Tom,
Oh, okay.
it was Tom who did all the communicating with me.
And if it-
well, and I know like the sidewalks, we're asking for a little bit more this year because we're trying to finish that
Finish it.
stretch. And so
Right.
there's a specific amount for marble, which again is something that if we didn't do, the town would have to do, so. So there's some that are completely understandable, and then there are others where it's just sort of assumed that we're just going to give this money and they can use it whichever way they want.
And keeping in mind that we're already giving them tax break because they're not taxing the properties,
Right.
they're nonprofits,
Maple Hill?
Not,
and any of them.
not us, the state of Vermont.
Well, the state of Vermont is, yeah,
Makes that
well, it's
decision.
affected to our pilot program. but-
Way above our pay grade.
Okay,
So do we have to vote for?
The article stuff, I'm good, I can make those changes.
Yeah, I think
was
and
there
I-
anything else in the warnings that you
Don't
wanted
we have
to?
to vote to have a public something?
Yeah, we have to vote to warn the budget
That's what I.
for January.
Yeah.
You're right,
Okay.
Frank.
So moved.
I'll second.
All in favor, say aye.
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 Okay. And was there anything else in the warning that we needed to discuss, that we haven't discussed? Or just look through it for typos?
So yeah, please do. It's gonna go to Barlow, but you never know, it comes out the other side of these things.
Every once in a while, you
You're
know,
like
you think with
60
autocorrect and everything else, you
Right.
still find
Yeah.
like one word of,
Well, the warning's gonna change big time now because
Yeah,
they
Right.
take
it's gonna
all
be
those
all out of
articles out
order.
of it.
Three different people handling it, so it's
And we
like,
still miss
yeah,
something.
you
Yeah.
never know.
well, then we're not.
The only thing would just be to point out that Article 5 is that, you know, the using, dissolving of the sinking fund and then
Yeah.
using that money for offsetting property taxes
Right.
next year, which is pretty straightforward. This language hasn't gone to Barlow yet, but
Okay,
within reason, that's probably what it's gonna look like. The next step is to boil all this down, send it to Barlow, and then, bring it back to the next meeting.
okay.
So,
Okay. Old business.
okay. I'm sure I just hit the,
Sorry I took so much of your time on
No.
the question.
No, it's all right, we've been
The-
debating it
Nobody
for
ever
such a
comes,
long
so
time,
it's
so.
probably, Little Mountain Tom Tennis Way.
Oh,
Um,
what a mess.
There's a bit of an update that's not even on the paper here that, it was messy yesterday. I think I've explained at a previous meeting, basically the river is like cut a new path and it's actually going into a spot where it's not really supposed to go, which is never good for anybody. And at this point, the town has assisted with, trying to get permits for the large fix, which is to rebuild a berm, which is on the upper reaches of the river. As it stands right now, the town will get the permits, but the property owners have to then get a vendor and get a price and pay for it. And we'll see how that goes. It's difficult because you've got a lot of property owners, so there's a lot of, not necessarily competing opinions, but just people, you've got around people. So I'm not sure what they're, even if I had the permits tomorrow, I'm not sure how quickly they could bring the vendor and the funding to bear to do the work. So one of the other things that we've kind of been talking about, at least, definitely after yesterday, is there a way to potentially block the culvert that goes under Route 7 to maybe divert some of that water? It gets really complicated. It appears that first blush, probably the best entity to do that is the town, from a liability standpoint. There is ongoing damage, Pad Print had to close Monday, I don't think they were open today.
They were open, but it's a mess over there.
Yeah, so they've, they're, when they're not functioning, obviously there's a cost there.
And it's coming right through the windmill
Yep.
factory too.
Yeah, so
They
there's
said
a,
that culvert was just crazy.
Oh, I,
Yeah.
yeah, pictures. It's
It's
just a stormwater culvert that's only supposed to get the water that comes off the road, which really is
Wow.
little to nothing, cause there's grass around it. And it's got a, basically a 10-foot wide stream trying to go through it. And it's, it was submerged yesterday.
Yeah.
The culvert itself, so there's, millions of gallons of water that was going over there.
that was a video I took, yeah.
So I guess what I'm getting at is,
Jesus.
Thanks
there's
for water
been a bit of a
that's
hue
going
and
through
cry,
that culvert.
for, maybe there's, an effort to block that culvert.
When the water's going through like that, is that damaging the understructure of the highway?
It could be,
Yeah.
because it's definitely eroding, where
Frank,
the
you
culvert
should see the-
discharges.
They built that, there's like shot rock on the bottom of that,
Yeah.
and there's voids, and so just to the south of where that culvert is,
Yeah,
there's another, entry point that actually I thought was another culvert. And when I walked to the outlet side, it's just bubbling up out of the ground, so
so
there's
it's just, that's
water just
coming
passing through the
under,
base, the
yeah.
base material.
Yeah, cause what, my
That's
brother
right.
showed me a picture of it, cause he was
Yeah, it's
in
rough.
his truck and he could see
So-
it, my
Yeah.
younger brother. And so I got thinking about that last time, thinking, well, I wonder if that's weakening
it's
the
gotta be.
highway.
Yeah, it must be.
The rock is big and there's voids, when I told Chris at AOT, he didn't seem too concerned, but, I think it's a one-time deal versus like constantly being inundated would be more troublesome, but,
So the consequences of putting up a sheet of plywood and blocking that culvert.
the state will come back and take it out. And then they're the bad guys for taking the plywood out and flooding the property owners.
Well, where would it go? if you put-
The potential liability was the state of Vermont could sue you, and then, the property owner, which is Jim Forrest, who owns just unimproved property on the north side of the road, could have a issue if there was damage.
Just backing up on
Like
it.
if the water that you diverted went and damaged something, that you would be, in kind of our calculation, it's like the likelihood of lawyers and stuff at that point is probably pretty narrow, but it would be a pretty big help in days like yesterday. I mean, I don't know that it would have, you know,
Might have blown
completely.
out anyway.
It's
Yeah.
still
Yeah,
flowing
that's
through
what I was
right
gonna
now. In
say.
fact,
Right.
Yeah,
the
no, it'll
road up
conti-
to the transfer station, you gotta go through 6
Yep. Yeah.
inches of water.
Yeah,
It'll
and
do
so-
that for the next
and
couple days.
That's, thanks Henry for finally getting me back on my track. So that's the connection, is that's Tennis Way and the town owns that.
Huh.
So
That's
there's,
where our
it's a class
interest comes
4,
in.
we don't maintain, but, you know, it's being impeded, there's business, you know,
Public.
economic consequence, you know, negative consequences to it.
Public health
Is it
and
worth,
safety.
you know, it is gonna, you know, the water level is gonna go down dramatically. Normally when it's dry, there really isn't much going through it at all. But when it rains, it does go through it.
Even smaller rainfalls. it's
There will be
coming through.
water through it. So obviously yesterday aside, like the in-between rainstorms, if we blocked it, it would probably prevent that.
So
Until they can get their stuff together.
Where would the water go though if you block that? So you're gonna block the north, the west, the east
It
side?
goes along Route
Yeah,
7
east
and then
side.
back into the
Yeah,
stream.
just-
So
It's
it
a-
come back into Forest
Manton.
Field in this way,
It runs right along the side of the road.
Where it
It's
has
right-
been
where you-
going.
before the railroad track, or just after the railroad tracks on the south side, that big
Yeah,
meadow
it-
there.
Yes.
It depends on the volume of water yesterday. There was so much water that it was running along the edge of the road. If it's less than that, it may just kind of peter out and end up in the meadow,
Yeah.
like back into the trees. And it would
Go
just
into
kind
the state property.
of just, no, it doesn't go that far, but.
It wouldn't go that,
um,
all that water wouldn't go that far yesterday, you don't think?
No, it just goes right down to the river.
Oh,
So where the
Yeah.
oh,
bri-
I got you.
At the edge of that meadow.
before the
there's a little
railroad
stream.
tracks, there's a bridge.
Yep.
And that's where
Gotcha.
that's where it
So we'll go down
re-enters.
that river, yep.
Yeah,
And ends up in the Chanticleer.
correct.
Right, one
That's-
way or another,
so-
it still ends up there.
That's
So
that's
the good news was that probably saved the Chanticleer
Correct, yeah.
Yeah,
yesterday.
and then the,
Right,
the,
cause that's
the-
going directly.
There was
to the wetland that
millions of
not
gallons of
going
water
around.
that were not going into the main trunk of the Battenkill.
Yeah.
Right.
And also the work that was, the sediment removal work, it made a humongous difference, so.
Hmm.
I mean, the water was moving,
You could see it moving. just
oh, it
through
was
the
moving
wetland.
easterly
Yeah.
so fast, it was just ripping. So it's, you know, that's gonna allow it to cut that channel that they wouldn't let us build.
So we've applied for a permit to divert.
We've
the
applied for a
stream.
permit for the property owners to do the big fix, which is to rebuild a berm
Yep.
up at the
And
upper
the
reaches.
permit is to the National Forest? or
The project location is on the Forest Service property, yeah.
So it's to
so-
the government, the
So
federal government?
there's a, what's called a, temporary use permit from the Forest Service. There's one that's gonna be good for a year, and then there's another one that you could get that's gonna be good for 20 years. And there's an Army Corps permit, and then there's a river permit that has to be all.
So how long is this all gonna take?
I mean, the Army Corps permit's been applied for, the Forest Service permit's been applied for. I'm hoping that, you know, I'm hoping by the end of the year, I should have a pretty good sense of, we've
Okay.
got permits back.
Okay.
You know, then it starts the clock for them to
You
organize.
actually have to go do it.
Yeah.
Oh,
Rob?
Yep.
Rob?
Mhm.
With pad print, with the flooding, were any potential, like, printing supplies affected? I mean, is there any
I don't know.
toxic stuff that goes into the water?
I don't think so. I think it was mainly like, water going around like a cold storage space that they have where they keep, tools and equipment and machines.
Right.
I don't know that there
Right.
was, you know,
Is that a
I can
printing
ask
facility?
again, but yeah, it wasn't getting
Right.
into the main building. I think it's mainly access,
Okay,
vendor access,
right,
you know, stuff like that.
pick happens, right,
Yeah.
got it.
I talked to the owner, I drove over and he said it just wasn't safe.
Yeah,
You know, they've got
Yeah.
all this electricity, you can't have people
Yeah.
standing around.
Absolutely,
yeah.
But it didn't sound like it was what you're asking about.
No,
right.
the big issue is that they were out of, you know, work for a day.
Would dredging the rivers help? I mean, it's, cause the state doesn't wanna get involved in dredging the rivers, but you look at what happened in Londonderry again, I mean,
Yeah.
those
Right.
two stores that were closed for months just
Right.
opened,
All the
and
water
they were
going,
underwater again.
all the water going east of the bridge proves that the dredging, capacity restoration
Yeah.
works.
Yeah.
That's what I learned yesterday, there was so much more water going, you know, over to the wetland so much more quickly, you know, because that sediment, because the pitch was returned, you know. It's lower here than it was there.
And did the flow even kind of gouge it out some more?
I haven't been over there today,
I
or
think
I'm
so.
gonna wait and let it go down, but yeah, no, so we dug two, I'll try to, it's a really terrible illustration. The rail bridge is here.
Yeah,
We took sediment and debris out of all this area.
yeah.
Downstream of the rail
Yep,
bridge.
and then we dug out these two, what we call flood chutes. When they first dug them, Josh would only let us dig them, I think they're about 2 feet deep. Now they're over my waist.
Wow.
The water depth there is,
Good.
now it's closer to 4 feet. So, which is,
So
and there's,
They're working.
there's like heavy active flow. These flow all the time now. So the water, when the river, you know, he let us dig it down to the river level. So there's flowing water in there now. So eventually it's gonna cut through here, and this channel will just move, is what's gonna happen. And the beavers have put a gargantuan dam like right there. And-
Our friends.
yeah, they also had one here and then like here.
They
And
left my property and moved south.
that's
Ooh.
what happened. Sandy's fault.
That's hilarious.
So, you know, I think to your question, Sandy, it is, I don't know, you know, nobody wants to talk about, you know,
Well, they did try.
restoring capacity of the river, but it's gotta be, you know, in places where you've got so much private property that pays taxes, you've gotta do something.
Yeah.
You
Well,
just
even
can't.
in Manchester by the post office, they had dredged that, you know, Herman's guys who dredged it this summer. It went over the berm there,
Yep.
but it didn't flood out that whole,
Yeah,
that
because
whole
there
it has
was,
before.
development, because it
Because
had been,
there was additional capacity in the channel, yeah, and it's such a, you know, from a storm to storm, you never know, it might not make a difference, it might make a difference.
right.
In the smaller storms, it definitely does, you know, so
That river looked like it was as bad as it was last summer.
Oh, it
Yeah.
did.
Yeah,
The
it was going.
Fly Brook was just rumbling with rocks. You could hear them just come tumbling down.
Yep, the kind of, I guess to bring that all home, the work that we did on Pleasant Street Extension, that berm did exactly what it was supposed to do. There would have been water all
Oh, it would
over,
have been washed
all over the
down
place.
Pleasant
if we
Street,
hadn't.
for sure.
So, there's a follow-up piece there, right? And I guess what I'm getting at is like, you know, is it, you know, the town's job to really be thinking about this stuff holistically and start to look, you know, to look for the, you know, I mean, we have a hazard mitigation plan, we're supposed to identify, you know,
Yeah,
similar
potential.
areas, and that's kind of, I think, you know, it seems like with the weather, we need to just double down and,
Yep.
And right, should we
Anticipate.
start putting in a line item for general storm repairs that aren't, you know,
yeah.
regular wear and
Yeah,
tear?
there's a berm that's adjacent to the Pleasant Street extension berm kind of comes down and then it jogs away a little bit, and the next low spot is actually it's just downstream of the berm that we rebuilt, and that, to me, that would be a logical, like if you could get landowner permission, you can get another permit, you know, just get some more rocks out of the river and stack it up again, and see if you could add a couple feet to it. And,
So the railroad crossing bridge, it stayed underneath that? It didn't get up to that?
it was almost over the, like, top of the stringers.
Oh, it was?
Yeah, the thing's always in the water.
Oh, okay.
It was up to like the ties, almost up to the rail.
Wow.
So like almost all the steel was submerged.
Wow.
And it just kind of goes around it. It's like it was going into the Chalmers Pond, which there's culverts that outlet that into the wetland. It was going right around the storage buildings at Safe Place. Yeah, the new bridge will make a significant, you know, difference in the how the flood waters can flow, because there will be some room there.
Yeah.
Which the hope is that, you know, when that happens, then this flood chute that we dug out is going to be able
Keep
to
going.
just it's going to look like a bulldozer went through there the next spring thaw. So.
What about the ponds and dams of Madtown Road, you know, the beaver dams?
Beavers have been really active and they're doing a pretty good job. They've the water level is actually lower now. I mean, the last 2 days it's gone back up, but The water level as it relates to the top of the dam has gone down a couple feet. So either they built the dam up that much higher, which could be possible, or the water is, you know, has gone down a little bit. So there was a little bit of seepage around, I think, the southeast side of the main dam structure, and I don't know that they've fixed that. I think it's still kind of trickling around.
Okay, I mean, but that's a concern too. As far
Yes,
as
no, so
risk
I've,
mitigation goes.
yeah, and I've got a, to both the state contact and then an actual, you know, for-profit guy that does, that like will come in and design a baffle and do a bunch of stuff, and he's gonna come in the spring.
Okay.
And it could be, do you wanna spend $5,000 to do X, Y, or Z? I think that's where it might end up, so just a heads up.
Okay.
ARPA.
Then the last piece of old business is the Upper Hollow lot. We've dug test pits, we can get a mound system in there. And now the kind of question comes up of, you know, what next steps do you wanna take in terms of, you know, do we get the permits? I think one thing we need to do is, speak with the zoning administrator and just see about the slope impacts and what and how we could design a driveway and, in order to be able to get the town permit. So.
Where's that?
If you recall, like,
Upper Hollow Road, right at
this
the
was
peak.
pre-COVID, I think it
At the
was.
top.
It was like right at the,
It's a while ago.
yeah, it was like, when we first acquired it, we approved a sum of money to kind of take it to full permit level, so I guess I'm kind of back asking to make sure that you wanna do that.
To get the state permit, that's easy, because you don't need a site-specific design, they don't care about where the driveway goes or what your house
Yeah.
really looks like. So that, to me, that one's kind of a no-brainer, just get the state wastewater permit. But going through, to get a town permit, it's, you do that when you do that when you have a house designed, and you wanna do it. We could make something up and permit that, at least get, which would get us through the big question is, you know, making sure you get a driveway approved to it.
Yeah,
And then you could amend it when someone has a real house location and let them deal with it.
Well, the other side of it is we know we think we have two neighbors that are interested in just buying it and splitting it. And so, but they're not gonna do that until
yeah, then the realtor,
we show them some.
That we
Said,
can
you
do
know,
something.
if you list it with the permits, this is the value, if you don't,
Right.
that's a totally different value.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, I would go ahead.
Soldier on, okay?
Yep.
Will do. And then you can do, if you wanna do new business for short-term rentals, you can do that now, and then we can fly through the rest.
Well,
So I have a folder, I can put it in Google Drive, I can share it with the board.
mhm.
It's just it's the Londonderry ordinance, I think. I'm not sure. I mean, there's a few ordinances, there's a few towns that are, Killington's got something, Chester's got something.
Sunderland,
Yeah, some are more forceful, some are, have, you know, inspections and, you know, stuff like that. And then some are just like, you know, you have to register.
Right.
So at some point, some town staffer has to go on the apps and get the physical addresses of all the, you know, the 90 units or whatever, and then, you know, send out a letter and a form that says, here's your registration form, please fill it out. And then maybe a mass mailer or something like that. And then you start to get data on who, what, when, where.
Is there a state definition of what is a short-term rental, or is that a municipal responsibility, or?
I thought that's what what the planning commission had put into, the original zoning regs, it was something
Which-
like once it's over 30 days.
Which we removed.
Right,
Yeah, I don't know if the definition, you know, was retained in our bylaw, I doubt it,
I don't think so.
but, I don't know what the state
Because I think-
considers a short term.
I think what happened was, and we can double check this, but this is my recollection of the conversation, was that once a rental goes for longer than 30 days, then it's controlled by the state regulations.
Yeah.
So the state regulations apply
Becomes
to
lodging.
anything above 30 days, and
Yeah.
so that is why short-term rental
But
is
some of the-
anything below
Less than-
30 days.
Some of that stuff was just changed because, fire safety has some jurisdiction over short-term stuff now. I'm not sure to what capacity, but they do.
I was just talking to someone from Manchester Village, and I think they said that they either had or were about to approve an
They
ordinance
just did.
with it was
I haven't read it
simply
yet.
for registry.
Yeah.
Right,
So, I
yeah,
haven't
they
read it
did that a
either.
couple weeks ago, I think.
Was it
Yeah,
a
I just
journal?
spoke to somebody last week. So it might be good to see what they
Okay.
have. And then, yeah, it would be really helpful if we can see, through a Google folder, that way we
Mhm.
all have access to the same
be great.
information.
Okay.
And then,
And I think in the registry, we need to, we need more information than just, it's a, I'm doing it.
Yeah, I think
It needs
the-
to be like,
the
okay,
ones-
who owns it?
Yeah.
Are
What's your
you a
capacity?
primary,
Who's
Key
your-
holders, phone numbers.
Right.
Yeah.
are you the primary resident, or,
Right.
are you a bank in,
right,
you know?
and are you an
Tampa.
on-site resident, or are you out of town,
Yeah.
you just happen to have an address here?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think, like I said, I think having who the caretaker is would help as
Yeah,
well.
absolutely.
Because
Yes.
if there's an
Yeah.
emergency, you know who to
Yeah,
contact.
needs to be a phone number. Yep.
Yeah, I can come up with a memo.
I think we want that
For the
at
next
least, and then, I don't know, depends what our appetite is for stirring the pot.
Well, and beyond stirring the pot, I mean, I think it's, if we want people to register, then I think keeping it fairly simple is a
Some
good
have
way of just
fees,
getting the
you
information
register
and
and
finding
pay a
out who's
fee.
there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You cover
And if
the
you
staff
don't
time,
register,
too.
there's a big fine.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. Yeah,
Right.
if it's built into an ordinance, then yeah,
Mhm.
there would be a.
Yeah, put that on Google, let's.
Okay.
Yeah.
Let's
I'll-
look at that, and then we'll put it on the agenda for
Yep.
next meeting.
Great.
I'm gonna go, but before I go, could you, ask Liz how she stands with her petition as well, cause Liz, do you know where you stand with your petition?
I have not reached out to the general public.
Okay, cause I only have maybe about 10 signatures here, so you need about 10 more.
I need 10 more. I'm going to the Dorset Union Store tomorrow. And
Okay,
you need them in January, right?
yeah, the first part of January would be good.
Yep, no, we'll get that done.
Perfect, thank you.
We only need,
Absolutely. Thank you,
Have a
Sandy.
good
Thank you.
we only need 20?
You only need 18,
Oh, okay, I'm all set then.
1% or 30, whichever is
Cause
less.
you've got 8 here, and
Oh, yeah.
I've got
I've
almost,
got, yeah,
I've got 18 or 20
yeah,
already,
you're good.
okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
but most of those were forgeries, weren't they?
What did you say?
Most of them were forgeries.
Come on, this is being taped.
Good night, Sandy.
Good night.
That is
Night,
not on the
guys.
record, is it?
Not in the minutes, Rob.
Nope,
Okay,
hands are in the pockets.
so finance?
Yep, delinquent taxes, lower than last year, which is good, still a little bit higher than normal, but pretty much in line. About halfway through the fiscal year, and expense-wise, we're pretty much right on mark. It's been a mild winter so far.
Yep.
Maybe we'll end up with some leftover material, I don't know. That's kind of it.
Come on, it's not even the first day of winter yet.
I
No, I know.
Come on.
But no, we've had, I think I'll hit it later, but yes. Coolidge Lane payments have been coming in, people are happy with that. The rest of the fund balances are there. That's pretty much it.
Okay.
I move we accept the finance report as presented.
I'll second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, town manager's report, most of this we've gone over.
Yeah, I won't, I'll just try and keep the. So 8, we've been out with plows and or stone and salt 8 times so far,
Okay.
which is really not that many. Let's see. Fire district stuff is kind of the same, there's an opportunity there for an additional project, they're working through that process. It's definitely making sausage when you deal with the state and the funding and all that stuff, so you just try to remember that you're making sausage, that's all. As long as we end up on the back, on the far end of it with the project that we want and some favorable funding terms, then you're good to go. Let's see. Everything else we pretty much talked about.
Yep.
I
Yeah,
don't know that there's anything else to
great.
talk about unless you have questions.
No.
Definitely not.
Not to, but I will send it around, there's a report related to Act 250, and potentially some legislative changes that, it's interesting. I don't think
In
it's,
a good way or a bad way?
not for rural Vermont, it's not good.
Oh, great.
I don't think.
Oh, good, cause Act
Can't
two
wait.
fifty worked so well before.
I think it basically removes the, Act 250 jurisdiction in, cities, and then makes it harder in the rural areas. The forest block stuff, and, you can't cut a tree, so. Most of Vermont is, trees and
Yep.
forests
And
and single families, and,
not Burlington, it's South Burlington.
so it'll be interesting to see where that goes, but,
Oh, it's gonna suck.
that's it.
All right.
Need to sign some,
Yes, warrants or.
Good Wayne?
Hmm.
Okay, next.
jeez, a lot of them this time.
Yeah. Can tell you sign a lot of checks.
Yeah, I know,
Get it done.
Get done.
goes really fast.
Oh, just 3?
There should be a fourth there.
There's 4.
Oh, it's hiding. I move or adjourn?
I will second.
All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Everybody have a
All
great
right.
Christmas.
Merry Christmas.
Listen, Happy New Year and